happy to introduce our speakers, Amanda Cantu and Anna Smith-DeYoma, our Assistant Directors of Financial Aid. So I'm going to stop talking and turn things over to them.
Thank you, Elise. To get started, again, I'm Anna Smith-DeYoma, one of the Assistant Directors of Financial Aid. Before we jump into the application itself, I'd like to go over a few pieces of information, just some general terms within financial aid. Financial aid is a large term, and so we want to break down financial aid into some smaller terms for you to understand before we jump into the application itself. So within financial aid, again, it's a big term, an umbrella term, we sometimes call it. It is the umbrella of all these different types of financial aid. So there's two main buckets within that. There's gift aid and self-help. So gift aid is funds that you receive that you don't have to repay. So there's two common types of gift aid. There's scholarships and grants. So scholarships, there's many types of scholarships. There's your merit scholarship, which at St. Thomas, you receive a merit award after you are accepted for admission, and we'll talk about the timeline for that later on. That's just automatic based on your admissions criteria, what you receive for a merit scholarship. There are other types of scholarships, such as a talent scholarship. So at St. Thomas, we have business competition scholarships or music scholarships, where you have to compete and show your talent to earn those scholarships. We also have different background scholarships, such as a Latino Leaders Scholarship, which is for students who are leaders in their local Catholic Latino communities. So there are a number of different scholarships. Scholarships can be found within St. Thomas. We have a number of scholarships that we can get into later if there are any questions. Admissions mainly handles scholarships, those questions. But then there are also countless outside scholarships that you're welcome to seek out from outside organizations, your local community, or national organizations. There's also grants within gift aid. So the common grants are governmental grants through the federal government. The most common grant that you may have heard of is the Pell Grant. And then within Minnesota here, we have the Minnesota State Grant for students who graduate from a Minnesota high school are eligible to receive that based on your income. So grants are predominantly determined based on your income, your family's financial situation. We also have institutional grants here at St. Thomas. So from St. Thomas directly, we have funds to support students in pursuing their education. Most grants, you are going to need to submit the application, the FAFSA or the Minnesota Dream Act, one of two financial aid applications that you have to submit to be considered for grant funding. On the other side is self-help. So self-help is the student is working to earn those funds or will repay them later on in their journey and their career once they're done with school. Self-help is more you using those funds with putting in some effort to either earn them or repay them down the road. So the two common forms of self-help are work study and loans. Work study, or also sometimes referred to as student employment, is having a job on campus to pay your bill. You can put it directly towards your bill or receive it as a paycheck to use for living expenses. Here at St. Thomas, we do offer student employment to all students. And so that is an option a lot of students choose to use to help with paying for school. And then lastly, under self-help is loans loans. So within loans, there are federal student loans are a big part of that. And so those are low interest loans through the federal government that you can use to help in paying for school. The application for that is through the FAFSA. There are also a number of outside loans. There's the Minnesota Self Loan, which is a loan through the state of Minnesota, or there are private loans from outside lenders and institutions. So within loans, there's a wide variety of interest rates and just different applications as well. We won't get into too much of that in this session. We are going to have a session later on about in the coming months about understanding your financial aid award, and we'd be happy to go in more detail about loan options, or if you just want to schedule an appointment with a financial aid counselor here at St. Thomas, we'd be happy to talk about those options in more detail. So with the FAFSA application, there is some criteria we just wanted to go over to make sure you're eligible to apply for the FAFSA. So in order to be eligible to apply for the FAFSA application, you must be a US citizen or a permanent resident, or a few other miscellaneous immigration statuses. One of the most common is a refugee or an asylee. So those are the main, one of the major criteria to be eligible to apply for the FAFSA application. If you're unsure if you meet that qualification, we highly recommend you reach out to the financial aid office to determine if you're eligible for the FAFSA application. If you're not eligible for the FAFSA, in Minnesota, we have an alternative application. You only do this application if you are not eligible for the FAFSA. Commonly, this is for students with DACA status or who maybe don't have an immigration status. The major requirement for this application is that you have to attend a Minnesota high school for at least 3 years and graduate from a Minnesota high school. I am actually the DREAM Act administrator for St. Thomas, and so I'm happy to have any follow-up questions about this if you think this is the application you are eligible for and would be applying for, or happy to have a follow-up individual meeting about this application. One of the common questions we get from incoming first-year students and their families is it even worth it for me to file a FAFSA? Should I file it? We always say yes. There really isn't any harm in doing the application. It's free. It ideally takes you maybe a half an hour to under an hour to complete the application. And so we always recommend you at least complete it your first year and see from there if you need to complete it in the following years. At the bare minimum, all students who do the FAFSA application receive $5,500 of federal student loans. Again, those low interest student loans. They haven't set the interest rate for next year, but right now it's 3.73%. Oftentimes we do have families that are surprised at what they receive through the FAFSA, through their financial aid award. We have, again, institutional grants that the threshold for qualifying for that is a lot higher than the Pell Grant threshold for income. And so we always just want you in that first year to apply and see if you're eligible. For some institutional grants, we don't revisit your eligibility after your first year. And so we want to make sure you're not missing out in that first year if you are able to qualify for something. Lastly, we do have the ability to have a little bit more nuanced look at your finances. We understand that maybe your 2020 income is not reflective of what your current financial situation is, and we have the ability to make adjustments and look at if there's anything else your family is eligible for. We will get into more details about that later on, but at the bare minimum, this application is really what we use for anything beyond that merit scholarship to see if you qualify for anything else. So it's always worth it for you to just get it submitted that first year for us to see if there's any other forms of assistance to help in paying for school. With that, I'm going to pass it over to my colleague Amanda to get into the application itself.
Good afternoon. My name is Amanda Cantu, and I've been in financial aid for about 12 years now. So what is the FAFSA? The free application for federal student aid is used to apply for need-based aid, such as federal and state grants, work study, and federal student loans. As Anna mentioned, there is no cost to submit this application. When submitted, the student will be provided what's referred to as the expected family contribution, or EFC, which measures the family's financial strength and is used to determine the type and amount of financial aid a student is eligible to receive. The FAFSA is separate from the admissions application process and has no bearing on the student's merit scholarship. The FAFSA must be submitted on an annual basis to continue to be considered for funding each year. We encourage your student to submit their application as soon as possible to not miss out on any important deadlines. If you have multiple students in college for the upcoming year, the 2022-2023 academic year, each student does need to have their own separate application. So parents, you can transfer your information to another child's FAFSA form. However, this can only be done through a link located on the confirmation page. So if your student has already completed their FAFSA for the 2022-2023 academic year, this option would not be available, and you would just need to work with your student as they're filling out their application. To ensure the FAFSA is submitted successfully on the first try, we encourage families to gather the following documents. Many individuals may have this information memorized, but the FAFSA will require the information to be entered exactly as it appears on your documents. Parents do not need a social security number to complete their portion of the application. To prevent delays, we recommend having your documents readily available as you're completing the application. So the first step to filing the FAFSA is creating your federal student aid account, which takes about an average of 7 minutes to complete per account for both student and parent. So a separate account is required for both parent and student. Both parents can create an FSA account, but only one parent signature is required to sign the FAFSA. We anticipate students will be working alongside their parent to complete their application, but parents are highly discouraged from creating an account on behalf of their student. The FSA ID serves as a legal signature for signing legally binding documents, so it's essential that the student creates it on their own. This also ensures that information is not being entered incorrectly, avoiding delays. The personal identifiable information provided on the FSA account does need to be entered exactly as it appears on the Social Security card. There can only be one Social Security number per FSA account. If the student has an older sibling who has submitted a FAFSA in the past, it is likely that the parent already has a FAFSA already established. If you attempt to create a new one, you will get an error message, and you can just click on the forgot username or password if you can't remember what your information was. If you continue to have issues with accessing your account, you would need to contact FAFSA directly. While a phone number and email address are not required to create an FSA account, it is the quickest way to reset your password if you can't remember what it is. Otherwise, individuals will need to wait 30 minutes to use their newly created password if using the challenge questions that were created. Since only one email address and mobile phone number can be associated with an FSA account, students and parents cannot use the same email address or phone number. By creating an FSA account, students can log into studentaid.gov and complete various tasks associated with completing financial aid requirements, as well as accessing various tools to manage their financial aid. There are 7 components to the FAFSA. Parents, as you assist your student with filling out their application, it is important to remember that the application belongs to them, the student, and anytime you see you or your, it always refers to the student unless otherwise noted. And this is essential just to avoid delays. While the FAFSA does provide an option for the parent to complete the FAFSA on behalf of the student, again, it's highly encouraged that the student is the one filling out their application to avoid errors. Once the student selects this first option, they will be prompted to enter their FSA ID and password that they just created. There are currently 2 FAFSA years available for students to complete, so be sure your student is completing the 2022-2023 FAFSA form. This form will be used to determine financial aid eligibility for fall 2022, spring 2023, and summer 2023. If you're unable to complete your application in one sitting, the save key will be needed to return to your unsubmitted application. Throughout the application, there will be question marks to assist you should you have any questions pertaining to the information being requested. The student demographic section will be partly completed as the student will have logged into their FAFSA using their FSA username and password. If students notice their social security number is not correct, they will need to create a new FSA account with the correct number. So again, it's important to take time with this step to make sure it's entered correctly initially. Students will be asked to indicate which college degree they will be working on when they begin the 2022-2023 school year. In most cases, students will be working on their first bachelor's degree. When asked to select the college grade level, students will either select never attended college or attended college before. If a student is transferring in credits from PSEO or AP credits, they may select one of the other undergraduate options if they know which one to choose. Otherwise, when in doubt, the student should select one of the first-year undergraduate options. So students can send their application up to 10 schools. If you're wanting to send the FAFSA to more than 10 schools, the student will need to wait until their FAFSA has been successfully processed before making a correction. Students can then replace one school for another. We understand financial fit is an important factor when choosing a college, so we highly encourage students to submit a FAFSA to each school they are considering, even if they have not yet finalized where they will be attending in the fall. A student does need to be accepted to St. Thomas to receive financial aid information. The dependency status section is what determines the student, if the student is required to enter parental information, and Anna will be going over this information in more detail. The parent demographic section determines which parent or parents should be included on the FAFSA. The parent's marital status is their status as of the date the FAFSA is submitted, which may or may not necessarily be the status of the student's biological or adoptive parents. If your parent does not have a social security number, please have them enter all zeros, which cannot be used. So they can't use they can't use an EIN number or ITIN number in lieu of the social security number. When determining the parent's household size, be sure to include all required dependents, even if they don't live in the household. If they are required to provide parental information on their FAFSA, they would be considered in the household. And if you're unsure who should be included, you can always contact our office and we can review that information together prior to submitting the application. Filling out the parent and student's financial section is where we see the most errors occur. The FAFSA will ask the parent to enter their information first before asking the student to enter theirs. Parents, if you find you're entering your information twice, it's more than likely you're filling it out on the student section. So just be sure that you're remembering which section you're on. The FAFSA will indicate what section you're on as well. While parents and students can manually enter their information, we do recommend the IRS data retrieval tool be used as it transfers the correct year's tax information provided to the IRS directly into the application. Using this tool will prevent errors and minimize the chances of needing to submit additional documentation to the school. But please note that not all fields are populated by the IRS data retrieval. There will be some fields such as wages and other untaxed income that are required to be entered manually. So while the IRS data retrieval tool is highly recommended, we understand there are some scenarios in which it will not be available to you. In these instances, parents and students will need to manually enter the information. If entering the information manually, just be sure that you're going through each line carefully and click on the help button should you need assistance with answering any of the questions. The FAFSA does provide the corresponding tax line to cross-reference where you can find that information on your tax form. So the examples listed here, if it's asking you to enter your 2020 adjusted gross income, it will ask you to look at your IRS form 1040 line 11, and the FAFSA will provide all those instructions as you go through the application. The FAFSA requires both student and parent signatures. This is also another common mistake where only the student has signed or the parent has signed or none have signed. Since the student already logged in with their FSA ID and password, preferably the signature will automatically be applied for the student. The parent signature is then the only step left to complete. If the student lives with both biological parents, only one signature is required. So just review the information so the electronic signature matches the correct parent. If the student lives with only one biological parent, theirs will be the only one displayed. The parent will then enter their FSA ID and password, which will serve as their electronic signature. If the parent is unable to electronically sign the FAFSA, they will need to select other options to sign and submit. And that could be found on that lower right-hand corner. So if this is the option for you, they will need to print the signature page and mail it to the address listed on the form. This option does require more time to process, so it is essential to submit it as quickly as possible to avoid delays.
All right, so now we're going to talk about if a student has to provide parent information. Most commonly, the parent information will have to be provided until a student turns 24 years old. Generally, they have to put parent information. There are a few exceptions, which I will go through. A common question we do hear is if a student is just working on their own and files their own taxes, they're not claimed by the parent for taxes, they're wondering if they still have to put parent information. Unfortunately, you still do have to put parent information. We don't look at tax status and who claimed who as part of determining eligibility for being a dependent versus independent student. Again, it's predominantly based on the student's age, and so 24 is that magic age, and when the student just automatically does not have to put parent information on the application. Again, there are a few exceptions. So some of those exceptions are listed here. If a student can answer yes to any of these questions, they would be eligible to be an independent student and not have to put parent information on the application. So if the student is married or if they have children of their own, they can be an independent student. There is a caveat to that. So if a student is a parent, as you see here, it does mention that if they have children who receive more than half of their support from the student. And so the student does have to be financially supporting the child. If you're uncertain of that, just reach out to the financial aid office and we'll help get that clarified. Another common reason a student under 24 could be independent is if they've served active duty in the military or are an honorably discharged veteran. This sometimes can get confusing for students, particularly the National Guard. So if you have any questions, we highly recommend you either reach out to your designated military officials or work with the school specifically. Amanda is actually one of our specialists with military students in our office, and so she would be happy to answer any of those questions if you are wondering particularly about military and dependency status. Another common reason a student could be an independent student is if both of their parents have passed away or they were in foster care since they turned 13, or if they have a legal guardian, that is also an allowable reason a student can be independent. Lastly, if the student is unaccompanied and homeless or at risk of being homeless, so if they're not living with parents and don't have stable housing, that is another reason a student could be independent. We certainly recognize that there are sometimes unique cases that maybe don't fit these criteria. You'll want to work with the financial aid office directly if that applies to you. So in cases where it's unsafe for you to get information from your parent or you have absolutely no contact with your parent, those are those unique circumstances that we can work with you to determine if you're able to be an independent student. So you'll just want to reach out directly to the financial aid office if that applies to you. Another question we get a lot is deciding which parent to put on the application. So when we're referring to parent, we do mean either biological or adoptive. So if a grandparent adopted the student, if it's a legal adoption, we do require that that be the parent on the application itself. So again, biological or adoptive parents. If both parents are married to each other, you'll put both parents on the application. If parents are unmarried but living together, the application does require we still receive both parents' information, all of their financial information, if they're living together but not married, biological or adoptive parents. In the case of divorced or separated parents, you're going to list the parent that the student lives with more over the past 12 months. So you'll determine in the past year which student or which parent did the student live with more. I will point out in Minnesota, we don't have legal separation. We're not looking for legal separation. So it's okay if the parents have been physically separated. You are able to just put one parent. Again, it's going to be the parent that the student has lived with more. If a parent is remarried, you are required to put the step parent's information. If that parent is the parent that should be on the FAFSA, you do have to put step parent's information as well. We do, in some cases, have parents that feel that it is very equal, that students are living equally with each parent. If that's the case, the guidance is that you have to put the parent that provides more financial support. Again, that is pretty rare. We're really looking for which one the student live with more. And so if you have any questions specifically, or you are unsure which parent to put, definitely reach out to us and we can help get that figured out.
Okay, so we do realize that FAFSA can be very overwhelming. And as Anna mentioned, if you're uncertain about how to answer a specific question, please do not hesitate to contact our office. FAFSA errors will cause delays in processing your application. So again, reach out. We highly encourage you, students and parents to work together when completing the FAFSA, so it is completed as accurately as possible and signed by both parties. If after January 15th, you have not yet heard from us and a FAFSA has been submitted, please contact us because it means that we either didn't receive it or there are additional information needed to process the application. When reporting investments, we don't need you to include the value of your home or eligible retirement accounts such as 401ks or IRA accounts. Another common mistake that we see is if students or parents are contributing to these retirement accounts in 2020, they also must list those amounts that are found in box on your W-2, box 12, and those are going to be codes that have D, E, F, G, H, and S. If you have a business in which you own more than 50% and less than 100 full-time or equivalent employees, you do not need to include the value of your business on the FAFSA. Those two, again, are some of the most common mistakes that we see. Another commonly misreported item is taxable grants and scholarships. We recommend students and parents review the IRS guidelines to determine what is considered taxable scholarships and grants, as not all scholarships are taxable or required to be reported as income on your tax return. And again, as Anna mentioned, if your parent of record is remarried, please confirm that their spouse's information has been included on the application, because that will also result in delays. If they have dependents who live in that household, then we can add them to the household size as well. But again, please reach out to us with any questions if you're unsure about how to answer a question. Anna mentioned this a little bit previously, but the 2022-2023 FAFSA is based on 2020 financial information. If you feel your 2020 taxes no longer reflect your current financial situation, we encourage you to work with your personal financial aid counselor to determine if a special circumstance application can be submitted. The appeal process will allow us to review new information not reflected on the FAFSA, which will help us better to determine financial aid eligibility based on your current family's financial health.
All right, so once you submit the application, get through all the questions and submit it, this is what you ideally should see. I will say with the caveat, it's not going to initially say up in that green box how it says processed successfully. It does take about 1 to 2 days for that to happen. You're going to receive an email as well when your application has been processed successfully. When the application has been processed successfully, that just means that it's been sent to the school. It doesn't mean that your application is complete. The school sometimes has additional processes that they have to review the application or need some extra documentation for. And so again, just because it says process successfully doesn't mean you're totally done with everything. You want to check with the school to see if there's any additional information that is needed before the awards are generated. There is a way for you to initially see if there's anything else that you need. As we point out here, that student aid report is where you're going to want to review and check if there's anything additional that it's asking. So you'll receive an email to get access to this information, or if you see it in the lower corner highlighted down there, there's the view or print the student aid report. On there, it will tell you if the application was selected for verification. So verification is a process for us to just verify that everything's accurate. It doesn't necessarily mean that there's anything wrong with the application. The Department of Education just randomly selects about 1 out of every 3 FAFSAs to complete the verification requirement. And so you'll want to take a peek at that and see if it's selected. And then if it does say that you were chosen for verification, just know that you're going to have to work with individual schools to complete that process. Every school has a little bit different process, and so you'll want to connect with each school to finish up that process to get an official financial aid award from that school. We often will issue an estimated award for you so that you have just initially that information, but until you complete the verification process, it won't be an official award. There may be some other requirements listed on the student aid report as well. So that sometimes there is a major error and it will flag if there's something that looks a little off to us. So you can take a look and see if it says that there's anything that needs to be fixed on the application. It's pretty rare, but it's always good just to double check. And then again, reaching out to each school. Some schools have some separate paperwork that they need you to do before you can complete or receive a financial aid award. We are specifically going to start issuing financial aid awards to admitted students starting January 15th. So again, your student has to be admitted to St. Thomas to receive a financial aid award. It's important to get that FAFSA done now if you can, so that we can just roll out those awards and your family's award is in that notification on January 15th. And then if you submit it after January 15th, it can take up to 1 to 2 weeks. So just know if you wait till February to get it done, it can take up to 1 to 2 weeks. And then that lessens the time that you have to make that big decision on where your student's going to attend school. So again, here is just a timeline that lays out all these major dates for you. We just passed our early action deadline. So many of you may have already submitted your application for admission. If you missed that deadline, that's all right. We are actively accepting applications every day and are trying to get through them as quick as we can and get that admissions decision to you as soon as we can, so that then you are able to get that financial aid information once you are admitted to St. Thomas. We put our priority deadline for FAFSAs as December 1st, just so we can ensure if you submit it by December 1st, we can get that award out to you that first day we start rolling them out. And then another big date is December 15th. That's when we send out that initial admissions decision, as well as a merit scholarship that your student will receive. So you'll receive that merit scholarship if you're admitted on December 15th. And then a couple weeks later is when you'll get the remaining financial aid award. So again, we really just want you to have your FAFSA done and submitted before the holidays here, and then that gives you the plenty of time to make that decision by May 1st, reviewing your options. Us as financial aid counselors are more than happy to have a one-on-one session with your family, going line by line through your financial aid award so that you fully understand the cost and what committing to St. Thomas looks like. You can reach out. Each family is assigned a financial aid counselor based on your last name. And so you'll receive follow-up information of who your family's financial aid counselor is so that you can work with us to help you fully understand all of your financial aid award and answer any individual questions that you have.